Hello, everybody. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the founder's mindset. Building off of the previous episode on founder mode, we'll be diving into the potential struggles of bringing on and becoming a new visionary, as well as finding out if you have what it takes to be a founder yourself. We'll follow this one up with another in the founder mode series, so be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Founder mode part 2. So in last episode, right, we was more of a exploration and overview of founder mode, why it's a thing, why it's so popular right now, controversies around it, where people are misunderstanding it, and where why that is the case.
Yeah.
And so today we're going to focus more on leveraging founder mode,
Okay.
and the different modes or energies that make it up.
Yeah.
And doing that from different perspectives, different positions, where you find yourself as a founder, visionary, leader. I guess those different perspectives for context would be you're the founder and visionary.
Yep.
Current founder and visionary.
Yep.
You are a new visionary, CEO, leader, right? You did not create this.
Yes.
But you are now in that position. You are the new king.
Yes.
And then, right, you are elsewhere in the organization and want to tap into that founder mindset.
Right.
Starting with the founder, where do you feel the typical insufficiencies or areas of a lack of true comprehensive understanding lie regarding founder mode?
In no particular order. If you've never been a founder, you don't understand what it's like to be a founder. In some respects, it's like, bad metaphor here, right? But if you've never played baseball, you don't understand what it's like to play baseball. If you've never hit a ball at 90 miles per hour, you just don't have a clue for what that experience is like.
It's a little bit Plato in the cave kind of a thing, where you've seen it, you kind of have a fuzzy idea of what it is, but until you experience it, you don't understand it.
Yes. The first time I encountered a 90 mile per hour fastball, right? It was like, oh my God. And I'd been playing baseball. So I was in high school and, I've been playing baseball since I was in third grade. And that experience, I will never forget that experience, right? And the irony of it all is it was in Paris, right? And it was against the French team and, of adults. And I had never seen that before in high school ball. I'd never seen a 90 mile per hour pitcher. And it was just like, how do you even do this? I was the best batter on the team. And I was like, I don't know how to hit this guy. I think I did, but it was just like, it was scary and right. And it was intense and, and it kind of messed with your mind. And so, until you've been there, you don't really appreciate what it's like to be a founder. You don't appreciate obviously so much, right? You don't appreciate what it takes to start a company, especially if you're doing it on your own and it's your own money, it's your own resources. Let's say you have a family, right? And they're dependent upon you to bring home, money and take care of them. And so there's all of the responsibilities and pressure that's associated with being a founder, number one. Number two, my experience is, we've talked about the 5 entrepreneurial archetypes, and I don't think that all 5 entrepreneurial archetypes necessarily have a founder's mindset, which we can get into. But if you're a visionary founder and you're starting this company because you have this idea about where the world's going and how you can matter in 5 years or 10 years, or right, how you can build something that's exceptional, a lot of those, most of those, at least based upon all the research that we've done, have the sort of the NT temperament, using Kersey's model, the Jung-Myers model. So you're intuitive thinker. And so a lot of times, and this is our story, to this day, here we are 8 years in, And there's stuff that I have felt strongly about from day one that to this day I can't articulate as well as I would love to, for not just our own purposes, but for the purposes of marketing and positioning and explaining things to the world. So part of the issue with being a founder is sometimes you not only do you have all this pressure, but you're not as capable as you would like to be in terms of being able to explain why things matter a lot, like brand, right? This is an issue we've been dealing with from day one, right? Really helping people just inside our company understand why these things are so important to us from a brand perspective. Why is the ICP so important? Why is your compelling value proposition so important? Why is your compelling why so important? And, we always talk about the idea that, whether it takes 7 times or 20 times to explain stuff, it does. And now imagine it's like, it takes, 7 to 20 times normally when things are very explicit, coherent, and resonant. But there's a lot of stuff that's not explicit, coherent, and resonant because you haven't figured out the language yet, right, for explaining it. So founders have a whole bunch of things going on. They've got tensions and anxiety and commitments and just like their beings invested in this, bringing this idea to fruition. And it's a mess. And partially it's a mess because that's the nature of the personality, for lack of a better expression, of a lot of visionary founders, as an example. This is part of why I think founders mode is a thing. It's because sometimes it's like, you get pretty worked up over something. And as in the case with getting worked up over most things, most of the time the emotion is, it's internal issue, right? It's like, I'm mad at me because I can't explain it to you, but I know it's really important. And it's just like, and better than ever, now more than ever, just saying, just do it because I say so, that doesn't work at all. It's uncool. It's unfair. We all know that. But sometimes it's like, you're just going to have to trust me on why this is really super important for me. And that doesn't work for everybody. And I empathize with that. On the one hand, on the other hand, you're the captain of the ship. You're the king of the kingdom. There's a whole host of things that are inside of this concept, but ultimately, the buck stops with you and you're trying the best you can to attract and retain all the ideal stakeholders that you are ultimately going to need in order to turn this vision into reality. And it's a mess.
What would you say to visionaries, founders, the NTs out there that are struggling to help their team understand where they're coming from when they're not able to verbalize something? Right. And especially in a data-driven culture. Right. Which is very common right now. It's very practical and rational. We have all this information. We should use it. How would you recommend they approach that challenge of getting the team moving in the right direction without causing issues, right? Without being the kid at the playground saying, I'm going to take the ball because things aren't going my way. Without getting into that.
There obviously is no perfect answer in terms of how you ultimately start to knock down the common issues associated with starting a company and building and scaling a company. So it gets down into what are the probabilities associated with certain things being more important than other things. I believe that probabilistically speaking, getting your vision reasonably articulated early on, and then test and explaining it and sharing it and then testing it and having testable hypotheses is super important. So that's why, real early on, I believe, you should, if you're thinking about starting a company, first of all, you should, check and see whether or not you have what it takes. And so we have an assessment coming out to help with this. But presuming you have some confidence that you have what it takes to sort of go and take this challenge on, right? And there's a whole bunch of things inside of that. Obviously, it's, you know, you have the support network, maybe you have the capital, or maybe it doesn't matter because you're young and you know, and you can live off, you know, rice and beans or whatever it is. And you have a decent idea and you're excited about it and you believe that there's a real market there, then, you know, sooner rather than later, what I would encourage a founder to do is to, you know, you take advantage of our Vision Builders Workbook as an example, and start thinking about the things that matter, right? You know, who's your ICP? What's your compelling value proposition? Is the market going to be large enough to create a company that could ultimately turn into a stage 5 company? Do you have a sense for culturally, you know, what kind of a culture you want to build? You know, then sort of start working on the forever agreements that we've talked about a lot. And then, you know, I think what's really interesting is then, you know, now who are you going to surround yourselves with, right? So, and even having a sense for yourself, which we're hoping to help people do, and then having a sense for, okay, so if this is who you are, you know, can you go and start attracting some yins to your yang, right? And figuring out what, you know, what's important at that very first stage, product market fit, as an example. And so, you know, getting back to personalities, if you're an NT, a lot of times what we found is, you know, I surrounded myself with a number of other NTs because they were willing to, they were comfortable with sort of the intuitive, not needing to have all the data because I can't give you all the answers right now, right? And what you find is early on, my experience has been, and once again, this is a great thing to research, my experience has been that the traditionalists that you start to surround yourself with, the SJs as an example, if you don't have your act reasonably well together, it's hard for them because they're wanting to know the bits and pieces and understand everything. And they want to either buy into it or not. So they're an S, right? Bits and pieces versus a big picture N. They're a J as well, so they're going to be highly judgmental of, okay, does this make sense or it doesn't make sense given wherever they've come from. An SJ, if you bring them in early on when you haven't got your act together in terms of your marketing and your branding position as an example, they're probably going to get very frustrated with it, right? And so, you know, self and others' awareness earlier on is helpful. You know, part of what I'd encourage you to do is to, you know, depending upon, is this your first time, obviously, or, you know, go out and find someone who could be a coach, who could be a mentor for you and help you understand the earlier stages of the company and understand the dynamics associated with building a team, and attracting, you know, the right people for that moment in time. So first things first, just have a decent sense for your vision. You need that to attract and retain people. And then second thing is start thinking about who's really important for this moment in time. It could just be, if you're a software company, it could just be some engineers to help you, you know, turn your, you know, get product market fit. You know, one of the other things is, you know, very early on, I'm a huge fan of Jason Cohen and WP Engine. And, you know, his perspective is, you know, you should be going out and finding 10 plus potential customers who you tell them what you're building. You don't have anything for them. You just explain, if I build this, would you be seriously interested in buying this, right? I take it even further. It's, if I build this, not just the customer side, but would you, as an investor someday, you know, if we could prove these things out, would you be interested in investing? If I build this, you know, would you be interested in coming on as an employee? If I build this, would you be interested in being a potential strategic partner? If I build this, you know, would you be interested in being a vendor, right? So you work your way through the ideal stakeholder types, right? And get a sense for things. So, you know, so early on, right? I'd get my vision. I'd go out and do some testing without spending a heck of a lot of money. I'd do some self-awareness on whether I'm really, you know, up for and capable, you know, given where I am in my life of taking on this risk, taking on this journey, and then going out and getting some other people to, you know, sort of make sure that you're not just like, you know, obviously smoking something funny.
I would say from personal experience, working closely with an SJ can be very frustrating.
Yeah.
But it's usually because they're pointing out things that you're not seeing,
mm-hmm.
and they're forcing you to better understand where you're coming from so that
Yeah.
you can make it explicit.
Yeah.
And you're right, that it's harder.
Yeah.
But you will get to where you need to be sooner and with a much better holistic understanding of the broader idea.
Yeah. SJs are really interesting versus NTs, right? They're, in some respects, I mean, they're four different things, right? The idealists versus the traditionalists versus the conceptualizers versus the doers. They're all in some respects very complementary, right? I always say it takes thinkers, feelers, doers, and critics. It really, when you need that, do you go out and have all four immediately? Do you go out and, like you just potentially mentioned, we're insinuating, not insinuate, it's not the right term, but implying, is that, is the idealist the next person to chat with or work with? Is the SJ? Is it the SP? All of them matter. And eventually, you want all, you want the four of you, those four temperaments in the game together. Like I said, it depends, right? I think if you're super, super clear, right? If you have a really strong point of view, then you're highly confident and you're willing to put your money behind it. I don't know if the SJ is the next one out, right? For me, it's the SP, right? Let's just get stuff out. After we have our conversations, let's just get a prototype out there and get it into the marketplace. There's no right answer.
Let's say you're an NTJ, because I feel like that's probably a lot. It's probably the most common one.
Yeah.
We are both NTJs,
Yes.
so this makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like an SJ,
Right.
from a philosophical standpoint, is a good foil.
Right.
Right. You don't necessarily aren't doing anything because it's going to be slower, for sure. Having two J's,
Yes.
which is like right.
Yeah.
And so, let's say you're more in the prospecting phase of things.
Mm-hmm.
You're an NTJ.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the optimal foil for that, and why? We're not starting. We're not doing product market fit. We're not putting anything out there.
Right.
Just thinking things through.
I have my biases, and so I think the research this is an area I'd love to research. I think your gut is different than my gut, right? So I do not think the SJ is the right foil in the beginning, because as you pointed out, it is going to slow things down, and honestly, I don't want to get in the bloody argument about it. It's my company. I'm the visionary, right? I'm the founder. I'm putting my money here, right?
I don't agree with you here.
Okay. I didn't know if you would. I felt you were going a different direction.
No, I was trying to set it up.
Okay. Yeah. But that's me, right? That's me in founder mode, by the way, right? That was a good example of founder mode just now, what I just shared. But
in the beginning, you do need that element of speed and momentum.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't want to debate everything yet, and there's things I just intuitively, I'm talking about me as a founder. There's things I just intuitively, like, I'm making this bet, right? I believe in my perspective, I'm going to make this bet. I want to go work on this stuff as opposed to debate this shit. That's me.
So who do you want in that situation with you?
I like the SP, right? Because they can just help me get stuff done and get out there and iterate and prove. That's me. I would like to have an NF, right? Making sure that, maybe as an advisor, because early on, right, I had NFs around me early on saying, this is a great idea and people are going to buy into this. So it's interesting whether you lean into these people, these different types of temperaments as team members or as advisors, right? Or the reality is that when we started 90, I'd already been thinking and working on it for a decade, and really getting into, okay, is this market here? Obviously, I felt I was confident the market was here. I understood who I was selling to because I'd worked with over, hundreds by the time we started the company. So I had a lot of, confidence and conviction around what I was trying to do.
Knowing the whole thing, it's like, well, obviously, but yeah. And so it's a different story. But I think a lot of people probably in the early stages, like, I just want to clone myself and just have that, right? And that doubles their capacity.
Yeah.
And that's the instinctive desire. I don't believe that's the right thing to do.
I don't either. And I think that's an interesting thing. I mean, being a, founder, and we can talk about whether or not I was a founder at 40, 45 or 55 kind of a thing, right? Earlier in your developmental journey as a leader and as a business builder, as a, someone who's playing in the commercial market space, it's probable that you're more inclined to surround yourself with people who are like you. As you get older, you realize there's issues with that. And so I think part of that tendency to cloning my instincts decreases over time. It's a wisdom thing, right? It's an experience thing.
Yeah, that applies to anything, right? That applies to any sort of leadership.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to cover on the?
No, I think
I'm
looking forward to actually talking about the next two topics, because I think they'll bring us back to this, a more nuanced and deeper discussion around the core ideas here, right? The people who have founders' mindsets that are in companies, because I was one of those, on several occasions. And so I think that kind of helps tell part of the story here. And then, of course, the people who replace a founder, that's another interesting conversation. So however you want to sort of move this forward is good for me.
So I think the commonality within all these is those with the founder mindset. If you have that, you have it. If you're a visionary, you probably should have that.
Yeah.
If you are a founder, then you live that.
Yeah.
So from the founder's mindset, do you think that is a result of having a certain set of traits and being a certain place in your journey?
Mm-hmm.
And it should be looked at and adopted by those people, or it's a thing that is universally useful to understand for the broader range of personalities?
I think it's universally useful to understand. And this may be controversial. Once again, we're going to do research on this and prove this out. But I think that, part of the founder's mindset is, you are responsible, right? The buck stops with you. And I also think that the founder's mindset, and actually the founder's skill sets, capabilities, right, is if you need to be playing a long game. So you need to be highly conscientious, right, which is big five, ocean, right? So you need to be high, or in Enneagram, it's an 8. So you need to be highly conscientious. You are responsible, right, for the health and well-being of the world that you are creating, right? And you need to be playing a long game. And that means that you don't cut corners, that you don't do things where you harm your ability to create high trust relationships ultimately with all of your ideal stakeholders, right? So I think part of the founder's mindset is you are highly conscientious, you take full responsibility, you are playing a long, if not infinite game, you are confident that you've identified a long and infinite game that's worth playing, you know how to build high trust relationships so that, because you're actually playing games with all the members, all the different ideal stakeholders, right? So, as you and I've talked about over the years, in order to play an infinite game, people need to be joining you on the game. You need to be invited back, right? You need for them to want to come back, right? And so, so ultimately, you're taking this long-term game, building high trust relationships but ultimately with investors, obviously with your customers, with employees. And that trust is the three things: it's character, it's competency, it's connection. So you know how to help. You know the importance of sort of honoring your words and being a trustworthy human being. You understand the importance of being competent across all these different dimensions. It's not just the product, it's leadership, it's being able to deal with adversity. It's anti-fragility is extraordinarily important, in my opinion, as a part of the characteristics of a good founder. Back to Ocean, I believe you have to be a little bit disagreeable because not everybody's going to agree. And if you're really all about just making sure everybody agrees with you and everybody's happy with every decision you make, you will find yourself basically, you'll disintegrate. You can't make everybody happy. We all know that, right? You can't be all things to all people. So, part of the founder's mindset is conscientiousness. It's playing the long game. It's building high trust relationships. I also believe that a lot of founders are highly competitive. They want to win, right? You want to create this marketplace. You want to dominate, or at least be, you want to be a damn good company within that. If not a great company, if not the leader. I'm fairly competitive, so I want to be the leader. I want to do all this stuff. And so, I think there's a number of characteristics associated with, what I'll call a damn good founders or a great founders mindsets. And so I think you can identify a lot of these things through various assessments, right? Whether it's, the NTs for visionary founders as an example. We talked about the big five, agreeableness and what we haven't talked about, and conscientiousness. And then the other element is creativity. You'll see Elon's obviously extraordinarily creative. He's brilliant. He's highly conscientious, and he's highly competitive. And you put those things together. I think we've talked about this in one of the episodes a long time ago, right? I think Jordan Peterson did a really interesting take on Elon. He's like, look, when you're in the upper, 1/10 of 1 percentile along these four dimensions, you're 1 in a billion, right? So I think those are part of the founder's mindset. Now, other founders are, they have some founders, as we know, looking at Enneagram, for the most part, they're either competitive, conscientious, lifestyle, but lifestyles aren't really what I'm putting into my sort of core founder, because they're really more about themselves than they are creating a great company. But lifestyle, a lot of entrepreneurs are highly, sort of lifestyle oriented. And then a lot of founders are to be smart. That's really important to them to be smart and see things and understand things. And that's awesome. But my experience has been that sometimes that they just sort of go into their own little world, and it's like really super fascinating and interesting, but there's not the focus on the commercial side of the game, or there's not the focus on the taking responsibility for everything, or and in the commercial side of the game, I mean, creating something that's highly competitive.
So I think that was less about the mindset from a tapping into it kind of thing. I think it's more of the founder's internal architecture, right? What makes up somebody who's going to be a very successful founder or a successful founder.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with you.
No, right. Yeah. I'm saying that from the perspective we started at saying, right, are these traits or regarding the mindset, or is it something that anyone can tap into? Right, anyone can tap into it. So I think, right, when we're discussing the traits, like you have to be highly conscientious,
right,
low in agreeableness, high in openness, right? We've done these for research on this, but there are things there such as discipline, anti-fragility, growth.
Yeah.
Those are the things that anybody can leverage and tap into.
But see, this is the difference, right? Why I'm disagreeing with you, right? Not anybody can be a founder.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I'm saying anybody, we started off saying it's valuable for anybody to understand the founder's mindset.
Yes.
Which is different than that.
Well, so once again, I'm going to disagree with you, right? I think you need to understand that a lot of founders, right, are highly conscientious. You need to understand that a lot of founders are disagreeable, right? This is a moment right now where I'm showing my disagreeability, right? You need to understand that a lot of founders are highly competitive, right? And it's just like going back to, and that's part of their mindset, right? We can debate whether or not this all falls under mindset. For me, it does.
I think it falls under the traits of that individual. I think mindset's more of like where you live in that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a part of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I agree with you that it's valuable to understand that, but coming from the perspective of somebody who is not of those traits,
Yes.
what are the things that are valuable about the founder's mindset from a behavioral standpoint, not from a trait standpoint, that they can leverage, adopt, and use?
I'm focused on founders right now, right? So
If we don't want to talk about that, that's how the last part started.
yeah,
So
yeah,
now we're going to go into that, and I think it's useful
yeah.
for people to understand what's going through the founder's mind, what makes them
Why they
act the way they do.
Yeah, exactly. Why they behave the way they behave, why they think the way they think,
Mhm.
right?
And then what are the traits versus what are the behaviors? And
Right.
you kind of touched on the behaviors a little bit.
But don't the traits end up driving behavior?
Yes,
Yeah.
and the traits are somewhat malleable.
Oh, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I think neuroticism and openness are more malleable than the other ones.
Yeah.
Right? Like openness, you could just boost that with psilocybin. That's a whole other thing.
Well, yeah, which is interesting, right? And so you actually know a lot more about that from a research perspective than I do, right? But as an example, you can use the Johnson O'Connor's aptitude test to measure creativity, right? And I think we've talked about this before, right? And so, what's interesting is, aptitudes are supposed to be predominantly innate. Can some of them be, developed or whatever, unleashed with drugs and things like that?
Yeah.
I mean,
Molded or
instinctively, I believe they can be, right?
and most of us would hope they can be because we like to feel that we have more agency.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting. Like one of them's finger dexterity, another one's tone, another rhythm, rote memory. I don't know, where we are developmentally in terms of being able to supercharge
Characteristics. Right? Are you trying to fight somebody that you shouldn't be fighting? Is this actually a battle you should be going on? Right.
Yeah.
Being able to discern that is very valuable. Depending on your environment.
Yeah.
Things like neuroticism and openness, and so you can manage that. And for most people,
Yeah.
it's probably better to lower your neuroticism, shrink that amygdala, lower your chronic stress,
Yeah.
and help you have a more objective view on things.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And then if you're in business and you are a founder,
Yeah.
or you're doing that sort of thing,
Yeah.
being higher in conscientiousness
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah.
And it's not super valuable, but acting with more discipline, taking ownership of things
Yeah.
helps you move in the right direction there.
Yeah.
And just developing good habits.
Yeah. I mean, part of it also is,
Agreeableness with the shadow integration, right?
Yeah.
Right? So you just look at a lot of bad things that humans have done throughout history.
Yeah.
And you understand how that is, why that is the case, and how people, depending on their nature and nurture,
Yeah.
can find themselves in those situations.
Yes.
And understanding if you were in that situation, you'd likely be doing those things too.
Statistically speaking. Yeah.
And realizing that, understanding that darker side of yourself, and then integrating that healthily.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good way to lower your agreeableness if it is too high, if you are too obsequious.
Yes. Yeah. And then, on the openness front, it's really interesting. And there's so much work to be done, right? Which is why we're moving into this next stage, right? The age of understanding, so we can understand this stuff better and help people sort of be able to go after things that they're really super interested in and care about and passionate about. On the openness front, in my opinion, the higher you evolve in terms of levels of awareness, your ego, right? You go from in Lovinger's model, right? You go from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7. You are more open to other people and other people's ways of doing things, and empathetic to them, and willing to listen and engage and truly appreciate where they're coming from. That I deeply believe. Now, openness versus creativity is a really interesting
Subtrait.
conversation, right? Because I think creativity is probably less malleable than openness in terms of being open to others and other ideas.
And it'd be interesting to see, right, when you change openness through the various methods,
Yeah.
what is the effect on creativity?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's probably, I would guess there would be an effect.
Yeah.
Just not as significant as the holistic trait itself,
Yes.
openness to experience.
Yeah.
So if you move it, right, 10 percentile,
Yeah.
maybe you're moving creativity by 5.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
Interesting
that'd
conversation.
be interesting.
Right.
That's a whole.
A thing to work on someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's legal to do that research at the moment. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Then I did have some conversations. We just had our annual retreat here.
Yeah.
And we did some conversations about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
More around like, oh, when you're creating these things, are you just on ayahuasca?
Right.
Where is this coming from?
Yeah.
It's like, no, like you do that sober. It's like, well, yeah. And I just think that's like, those things are funny.
Yeah.
Those conversations.
Yeah.
'Cause there are things where you just look at it like, what on earth, right? If you especially are very removed from that way of thinking, from a stage of development standpoint or a creativity standpoint, whatever you want to attribute that to.
Yeah.
It is just like, what? Yeah. And you could look at, that's a whole rabbit hole we don't need to go down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So taking that back
Right. To founder's mindset.
to the mindset,
Yes.
there's the part of understanding the founder as a character.
Yes.
And then there's the
Attributes of a founder's mindset.
attributes of the mindset. And then, right, nobody is going to be just 100% like the prototypical founder.
Yeah.
So it's understanding how much variance, like what's the difference between you and that character. What would you say to somebody who feels like they're a little bit different or significantly different on the trait end, but still feels as though they are a founder, still identifies themselves that way, whether or not they've started a company?
I always say it, there's always exceptions to the rules, right? So let's just say whether you're talking about traits or mindset, right? That's a nice Venn diagram there, right? You never know until you go. And so, if you genuinely deeply believe that you want to be a founder, if you because there's like, I just want to be an entrepreneur, right? I just want to be a founder. But, do you have an idea, right? Are you willing, can you go out there and get other people to buy into your idea even before you bring it to the market? Are you willing to sort of take on all the responsibility associated with this journey? Can you last a year or 2 or 3? Do you have confidence the market is going to be as big as it's going to be? There's a lot of things, right, that you should, if you need to look into and understand. I believe, if you want to experiment with it and like have a night job, and then sort of test it, then that, there's a lot of people who do that as well. Go into it with some sense for what the journey looks like, what it tends to take, how you match up against, statistically speaking, the characteristics that are typically associated with successful founders. And then, part of it, which we haven't even gotten into at all, is maybe you have a lot of the ingredients, but not enough to do it on your own. And so you should go find a co-founder, right? And then there's a version of a founder with co-founders, or there's a version of just co-founders, right? And so now it's like, we're going to be equal partners, and then, there's a lot more I can get into there because I've seen this crash and burn way too many times, which is that you have, 2 or 3 people who are like, yeah, we're going to do this together and we're all going to split it, 1/3, let's say it's 3 people. And the next thing you know, you turn around and 2 of them are, like not working and you're working your ass off. And you just, you guys didn't really do the hard work ahead of time to say, okay, so how do we make sure this is fair, right? Very early on, how do we make sure this is fair? And if you start, and because once again, I've seen this so many times, right? If you start to bicker about this crap and you can't like really swiftly align on what fair looks like, I've seen teams spend a year, right? Just pathetic, right? Just all talking about all this, their own shit rather than building the company, they're worrying about themselves. And none of them have the founder's mindset, right? They're all just like, it's a game and they're playing business, they're playing founder, and it's embarrassing to watch sometimes. I'm being harsh right now, but going back to this, sometimes, you aren't well positioned to be able to do this on your own. So you need maybe one or two other people. But once you start doing that, you need to make sure that you guys are crystal clear on how you divide and conquer, what fair looks like, how the economics work, right? How do we judge progress? And there's a lot of things that go into all this. But big picture point I'm trying to make is sometimes, you could be a good co-founder, but you can't be a good founder. But now that becomes more complex as you got two or three other people. You got to figure out all that stuff, and trust and competency and care, and just having explicit agreements on how do we make sure this works for us. And we march down the field a little bit and check in all the time. How do we feel it's going? How do we feel it's going? How do we feel it's going? Are we capable of having really open and honest conversations around things? Or do we have, different variations of trust and passive aggressive stuff and all this other kind of things going on. So, there's more than one kind of founder. Clearly there's more than one kind of way to start and start a company. Single founder, co-founders, founder plus co-founders. But ultimately it gets back to all this is just a game, unless you really have a strong point of view about what you're building and where you're going and how you can measure progress so that you all feel good about staying on the train, right? Staying in the game.
So for those going into this,
yeah,
do you think that there's any sort of rites of passage before going to the, right? You not waited, but you didn't really begin the founder journey until you were 45.
Well,
at your earliest,
but this is the conversation that I did want to have here, right? Which is, I had a founder's mindset very early in my career, right? I questioned things, I went and took responsibility for things and took responsibility for a team. Within 6 months of me having my first real job coming out of training, I took my boss's job. And I actually said, we should be doing things this way versus another way. And so I was highly conscientious. I worked my ass off. I had strong points of view about the right way to do things. And then I took a lot of risks, right? And in hindsight, selling drilling rigs to China in 1984 is crazy, right? And having conviction that the price of oil and West Texas Intermediate was going to go from $28 to $8 a barrel, and then convincing, the bank and the FDIC, because the FDIC had interest in all of this, that I was right and we should start dumping, drilling rigs and oil fields and all this kind of stuff, and related facilities. And they all, I made a compelling case and started doing it, and prices started to decline rapidly. And, I had people with huge deposits that wouldn't walk away from. And those were things that, like, I was, doing things that the average banker that I was, all the people around me, they weren't like playing an aggressive game like I was playing it. But it ended up, I ended up doing amazing work. And then I got to go and help start another business within the bank at the ripe age of, I think I was 25 or 26. Right. And once again, I went in there, had a point of view, and did all the hard work and worked my butt off and created stuff and developed positioning. And so, I started showing founder mindset really early in my career. And then, by the time I'm 36, I'm running a multi-billion-dollar lending and investment company, once again, because, I had strong points of view about where the world was going, how the industry needed to evolve, how we could create like a very special competitor within the industry. And not to brag, but I've said it before, right? That business that I took over and helped develop the strategy for back in the late 80s, early 90s is the only one to survive, the only leverage lending player to survive the 80s, period. Everybody else is gone. but that business now is over 50 billion in assets, and still very, very, very strong competitor. So, so I think there are a lot of people that within organizations who have the founder's mindset, right? Now, I was super, super lucky in a lot of regards because I don't want to say they humored me or they tolerated me, but there were a lot of people who did not agree with me.
There's a lot of people that didn't humor you or tolerate you in that journey as well.
I'm sorry?
And there were a lot of people on your journey that did not humor you or tolerate you.
Yeah. I've said this
part
before,
of it, and that's okay.
I've had 4 jobs, right, where I work for other people, and every single one of them either threatened to fire me or fired me because, I had strong points of view, and if I believed in them, I didn't stand down. That's part of. Is that a trait? Is it a mindset?
I think that's a trait, and it's an expression of the trait.
Yeah,
I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
So obviously, these founders
mm-hmm.
and these individuals can be difficult to work with,
mm-hmm.
given that case, given this whole thing.
Yeah.
So what would be your advice, your message to our integrators, operators, second in commands,
mm-hmm.
when it comes to working with these founders?
Yeah. I this is why, I've been fascinated by, assessments and traits and understanding humans for a long time. And, since the day we started the company, we've been using assessments, not just, to make sure we're not putting square pegs into round holes. We've used Kolbe since day one to really make sure that we're not asking someone who's, just like very structured, very high fact-finding oriented, very, high in follow-through. We're not asking them to go do, sit in a seat where lots of risks exists and where a lot of experimentation needs to take place, where too much research is going to get in the way of getting shit done, right? So Kolbe helps make sure we're not just putting square pegs into round holes, because it's a really good tool to sort of match up people against the basic requirements of the seat in terms of the objectives of the seats, in terms of how the seats need to be, the type of work associated with the seats. So, we've used that. We use Type Coach to give us the Jung-Myers lens, right? The Keirsey lens. We use Enneagram to give us a sense for what motivates people. And we do this because for a whole host of reasons, including it just helps us talk about stuff, right? We can talk about the nature of one human and how we, tend to behave, tend to act, what we tend to value. And so I think just better understanding ourselves and better understanding the other individual and being able to talk about it and see that it's not, it's not Cole versus Mark. It's this really interesting mix of characteristics that enables us to have healthy conversations around who we are, who the other person is, how we work well together, where we may have some friction, to lean into that and say there's not an issue here because I value you for understanding the bits and pieces. As an example, if you were an SJ, I value you for helping preserve that we've created. I value you for questioning things. If you're an idealist, right? I value you for making sure that I'm not missing the emotional component of what's going on right now. And so, I think it's really important. We talked about it a little bit earlier. If you're talking about a visionary versus an integrator, EOS speak, or a second in command, R speak, or chief operating officer, it's that you want the power of the yin yang. You want the power of the complementary characteristics. You want to lean into each other's strengths. You want to have some patience with the stuff that's kind of a little bit bothersome, because it's a double-edged sword, and you know that, right? And so ultimately, ultimately it's about respect, right? It's about respect for one another. It's about respect for our competencies. It's about respect for the moment the human's in, and the connection side of that. It's about you're both excited about the game you're playing. You're both excited about serving the ICP. You're both committed to honoring your forever agreements. And then you're both at peace with the fact that you're less than human. You're human. You're going to make mistakes, right? We talk about that all the time here, that 15% failure rate's actually optimal for learning. And so, it's just about being open about the nature of who you are as individuals and how to best work together to pursue a common goal. And to talk all the time.
The communication is important.
Yeah.
We talk about forever agreements, and these are things that a lot of founders are going to consciously or not bring to the companies they start.
Yes.
Right. So if you are a new visionary coming into an organization that's already established these forever agreements,
yeah,
trickier spot versus coming with your own understanding of things, and if that's well developed, that's great.
Yeah.
When you're a founder.
Yeah.
But let's say in a company where these things are there,
they're there and
they work
and everybody's committed to them. So what's interesting is if you have a great process around, let's say I'm the visionary and now I'm going to bring in a new visionary. I'm literally going to sort of exit stage left, right? A great process. Also, first of all, the best of best worlds is that there's someone within your organization who's been living these forever agreements for years and years and years and honors them. And there's no question, right? There's no question that they honor them. That's easier, right? It's, the more difficult situation is when you go out to, bring in someone from the outside. And now the question is, do they really buy into them? Do they really truly understand these things deep down inside? And they're fully committed to honoring them? Or is it, yeah, I hear you, but right, when I get here, I'm going to do it my own way, right? And, and maybe I hear you on 3 of these, and on the 4th one, I disagree, right? That's problematic, right? And so, that's why, we're huge believers, and, even when we hire people, especially anyone who's more senior in the organization, we do that full top grading interview, 3.5, 4 hours, really understanding the human, multiple meetings, talking about who we are, where we're going. We have our On90 document that is available to anybody to see online, but everybody reads it before they get deep into our process. It talks about who we are, forever agreements, and how important they are to us. So, you should, you need to have discipline around that process. It's hugely important. And, and part of me says, shame on you if, you bring on a visionary who you don't genuinely believe honors all the things that not just you, but your entire organization, right, is committed to.
From the exiting perspective,
yeah,
right? You are the founder, or you're the current visionary,
yes,
and or team,
mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes that for whatever reason that leader might not be involved in this process.
Mm-hmm.
What is the quick and dirty on vetting the incoming visionaries,
right,
for said role from a values perspective, basically?
The power of a chronological in-depth interview is it's 4 or 5, 4 hours, let's just say, right? And what you're doing is, you're really understanding that human's career, and really understanding, sort of not just their story, right, but the story that they say others will share about them. Okay. So, what we do is we want to understand who you worked with, who you worked for, who reported to you. We do the whole classic ABCD thing. Did you think they were an A player, a B player, C player, a D player? Did they think you were an A player? And then ask the questions why. And you're doing that, across, 10, 15, 20 years, depending upon their career so far. And then ultimately you're getting the names of all those individuals who they've worked with. And, it's called threat of reference check. And you say, hey, by the way, we reserve the right to talk to any of these people And so, you get a list of 20 or 30 people and you hear these stories, and now you go out and you do reference checks. And reference checks are extraordinarily important because you come out of that process and you're like, yeah, I think this person they are a team player, right? They have the level of ego that we believe is essential for them to be successful in our organization. They are resilient, right? They are inquisitive. They are a lifelong learner, as an example. They are, they all the stories they've told us is they're very good at lifelong learning and not just lifelong learning, but becoming better and better versions of the best version of themselves. They've evolved well, right? And they're extra mile, right? They're willing to go the extra mile. And so they've told you all these great stories, right? Because you've gotten to this point in this process. And so they'd love to join you, and they've told you all these great stories. And now you go out and you talk to a bunch of the references and say, hey, these are the stories we've heard. These are our core values on a scale of 1 to 10, right? We've got a lot of questions that we ask if it didn't work out within a year. And I met you on the street and I say, hey, it didn't work out. Why do you think it didn't work out? And so there's a really intense process that we go through to vet people, to reduce the probability that things are different than they appear. I've been doing top grading since 1992, right? Hundreds of executives. When I don't do the process right, I've run into failure. But if I do the process right, I'm well over 90%, right? But our process isn't just the sort of the top grading Brad Smart, Jeff Smart process, right? We're also using the other tools. We're using Kolbe, right? We're using the Type Coach. We're using our version of Enneagram, because it tells us this, gives us this more contextualized story. And so when we're chatting with people, we have a pretty damn good sense whether or not this is going to be truly a right person, right seat fit, a great right person, right seat fit. So, I statistically speaking, and I almost hate to say it, but there's no question I'm over 90% when I do it right.
Flip side.
Yep.
You are looking to join, or you're being interviewed in this whole thing.
Yeah.
Either you're looking or you're being brought in.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things to look for as the possible new visionary
mm-hmm.
in an organization to make sure that it is the right place for you, or it's a place where you'd want to be?
Yeah. It's kind of the same coin, only the other side, right? In terms of, now I've just talked about how we want to make sure that the human is the human we think it is, right? Now for you, is the company you think it is? Meeting with lots of people, figuring out whether or not everybody does buy into the forever agreements, or whether there are any forever agreements, right? And maybe in some regards, you're a visionary who, because I could see myself being this way. There's this is a decent company, but there's a bunch of stuff that it just isn't good at yet. And these are fundamental things. So, maybe culture's not even established yet. Now,
that's more opportunities.
That's opportunity, right? But there's risk too, because you're going to lose people, right? If there's not a strong culture that's been developed, and you have a strong point of view on culture, and you come in there, there's a probability that you're going to have some people who don't end up buying into what you believe the culture needs to be, and so you're going to have to deal with that, right? It's inevitable, really.
And you could be so disagreeable that you enjoy that.
Yeah.
That is a thing.
Yeah.
Enjoy, but you find value and meaning in cleaning it up.
Oh, well, let's be honest. I've got a warrior in me,
Yeah, everyone has a warrior in them.
Yeah.
How dominant that is.
Yeah.
Right, that varies.
Yeah. So I'm not afraid of that battle as long as if I feel like
it's a worthy battle.
It's a worthy battle. Exactly. Right. So, we're obviously getting into some complex stuff here, but, but I would say that I personally would never join a situation as the visionary where I didn't think that I had a strong point of view about where this thing could be in 5 to 10 years, and that the journey from here to there could be really super cool and exciting, right? And then I'd want to vet whether or not my vision, resonated with people as I was going through the process, because the last thing I want to do is, get there and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I've got this great vision and this is where I want to go and this is what I think matters and this is where I think you guys, we could be so much better. And everybody's like, no, we're good the way we are. It's all working fine. And you're going to be just running into, just a lot of politics and bullshit. And in some situations, right, the board's got your back because that's a whole nother conversation. But let's just presume this is a board-led company. And you're like, look, this is what I'm going to do. And by the way, I know there's going to be people who are just going to completely disagree with me. And I will do my best within X period of time to get them to get us all to align. But if we don't align, you need to understand that I am going to be firing people. So, and I need your, I personally, I would put it in writing and I'd get their signatures on. This is how important it is to me, right? But let's just say for the sake of this conversation that we've got this, they think the head of sales is amazing, but the head of sales is completely antithetical to what you want to do. I'm like, yeah, I want to know right now, if I can't get Joe or Jane or whatever to come on over and get on this wild and wonderful crazy train, that I have the ability to fire them. As a visionary, you need to be able to have that capability. Second command's a different story, but you need to be able to have that ability, because otherwise you do not have the power you need to lead.
To wrap up and build on that, what would you say the right in abbreviated version, like 2 minutes or less, what would you say the red flags are when entering in a new organization that pop up that you're like, whoa, this is not a risk that presents opportunity. This is not a fun thing. This is like danger.
A board that has its own political crap going on, right? So, you go in and the board has a variety of different personalities. They're not aligned. There are a bunch of different agendas that are going on there, right? That's a big red flag, right? You not being able to, a founder visionary who's not going to, give the reins to you, right? They're going to stay on and basically be involved, and they're going to question everything. And they've got much more authority and credibility than you do, because you're the new bloody person. So that's another clear issue. Obviously, if you don't think the economic model is obvious, if you don't think the market is obvious, if you don't think the forever agreements make sense and you can't change them, right? There's a bunch of stuff that you want to go through. If the culture is a mess, the market's a mess, the board's a mess. I mean, there's a bunch of things. Unfortunately, look, if this were easy, right? It's not. So, so you got to go through there. I have my own lens of things that I would, filters, whatever, that I would look at everything through. And then, you end up with this degree of difficulty associated with, with winning, right? With getting it to a place where you're super stoked to be the leader, where you're totally comfortable taking on the burden of being the visionary.
If you are a founder and you're not the visionary for certain reasons, a lot of people start companies young and then, right, they're not the best person to lead that company. How do you deal with that tension of being the founder, of this being your baby, but you're not the one at the top driving the big decisions?
Well, if you're the founder and you're not the visionary,
or not the visionary yet at the moment, it's just very weird case.
Yeah, it's a weird
case. There are a lot of examples of this.
Well, then I would go back to, it's hard, right? So you founded a company where you don't have a vision, right?
Or you do have the vision, right? You established the vision, but you're not the one running the company. whether it's because you have a lot of companies and you're someone, right? You're an entrepreneur.
Right.
You have a bunch of companies that you've started like this. I need this thing. I'm not going to be the one to run it. And you're going to take a step back and you're basically working for the person that you've hired, whether it's that or it's just you're at the moment, you're not the right person to be running this thing. And you have that level of awareness where you can make that judgment.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different use cases there, right? So let's just, let's look. Yeah. I mentioned Jason Cohen earlier, right? So he's the founder of WP Engine, but he got to the point where he's like, I don't want to be this person anymore. And so he went and found a woman to be the CEO, and he's now, I think he's the CTPO or the CTO, right? And he's very much loves it, right? He loves her owning all of those things that the CEO owns, and he loves owning the things that he loves. I'm sure they're aligned on the forever agreements, right? Basically, right? He's at peace with not being the CEO, right? That's and based on everything I've read, and I'm confident, like he's super at peace with that. So ultimately, you have to find, that define that relationship so it's one that's healthy. The idea that the founders working for a new CEO like Jason does, that's not normal, right? Doesn't happen but it does happen. And so, and I'm confident Jason went and found her, and I don't know the story, whether she was inside the company or he recruited her, but, he made sure that he found someone who he would love to support using the terms you used.
What are the key components of the founder mindset?
Genuinely owning the position of being the leader, of being responsible, of having the vision, of keeping people excited and focused, and being at peace with the fact that things, and you and I've talked about this a lot, being at peace with the fact that, we are where we are, learning the lessons we need to learn, having the anti-fragile, we're going to learn from this moment. It's the vision, it's the temperament, it's the dedication, it's the owning all the issues. Genuinely, not just saying it because people say it, but it's genuinely deep and down, it's everything, every issue is, you're responsible for. You created, you hired them, right? And being at peace with the moment you're in, being at peace with the mess you've created, having a sense that you're surrounding yourselves with people that can help you take things to the next level, just owning the journey, owning the destination, owning the energy, and then owning creating a culture that attracts and retains highly competent people that are great, right people, right seats, and that ultimately owning that you are the one who needs to be working constantly on not just creating high trust relationships, but maintaining high trust relationships with all of your ideal stakeholders. And that means you also own defining what it means, what your ideal stakeholders are, who they look like, who you are. So there's a lot that goes into it, but ultimately it's like the buck stops with you, right? And we can go into rabbit holes on this, but it's recognizing that, if you go to the king archetype, right? There's moments where you need to be the warrior. There's moments where you need to be the philosopher, right? There's moments where you are the magician. Sometimes you are the magician because you are literally the innovator of a product and their service, but you're really the innovator of a company, right? You're creating this thing that hopefully has this, potentially infinite journey in front of it, right? And then owning that, in order for you to attract and retain people, every now and then you got to stand back and you got to be the lover, which means helping people appreciate the moment they're in, appreciate, like we just had our retreat, appreciate being in the mountains, appreciate one another, appreciate the absurdity of certain moments, creating a super healthy environment where people are focused, aligned, and thriving.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.